good morning, everyone. Here we are again. It's our 6th week of virtual preschool, and let's go ahead and figure out what day it is today. So, the last day of school we had, does anyone remember what day that was? It starts with a t. Yes. If you said Tuesday, you are correct. Then we had Wednesday, which was a forest class day, and so today is, anyone know? It starts with th. Yes, it is Thursday today. So we're going to move that frog on down to Thursday. And let's go over here and figure out what the name of our month is. Who remembers the name of our month? Yes, it is October. And we are getting very excited because Halloween's coming up in just over, let's see, like a week and a half until Halloween. That's so exciting. So let's go ahead and count the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and today we are going to start adding 2 days. All right, but previously I have just left up the day for the forest class, but today we're going to add both. All right, so let's see, what comes after 20? That's a tricky one. Yeah, if you said 21, you are correct. So let's figure out if it's an apple or a pumpkin. Let's see, apple, pumpkin, apple, pumpkin, apple, pumpkin. So yes, we have a number 21 on a pumpkin, and that was yesterday. That was a forest class day. So we need to do one more number. Let's see here. 19, 20, 21, 22. And let's see here. Apple, pumpkin, apple, pumpkin, apple. Yes, so today is a number 22 on an apple. All right, so let's say the day together, all right? So today is Thursday, October 22nd. All right, so and remember we are still in the season of fall or autumn. The whole yellow section is fall or autumn, so October, November, and most of December. All right, so let's see here what our weather is today. So everyone needs to look out. I forgot to slide my table over. Everyone needs to look out the window and figure out what kind of weather they have at their house today. So, and remember, there can be more than one kind of weather on each day. Today, is it windy? Is it foggy? Is it stormy? Is it cloudy? Is it partly cloudy? Is it rainy? Is it snowy? Or is it sunny? All right, so you need to look out your window and see what it is today. And then we need to figure out what the temperature feels like today. My goodness, right now in the classroom it's kind of warm because our heat in here, it kind of blows out cool air for a while and then it blows out warm air for a while. Right now it's blowing out warm air, so this week it's kind of warm. But let's see what it's like outside. So you might have to step out your door to figure out what it's like outside. So is it hot today? Is it cold today? Is it warm today? Or is it cool today? So you gotta step out your door and see if you can figure out what it feels like today. All right. So we have been talking about one of our fall fruits that you can, well, it's one of the fruits that you can pick in the fall, right? Called pumpkins. And the last day of school, we read a book called Pumpkin Pumpkin that talked all about how pumpkins grow. And if you came to small group on Tuesday, we talked about that, didn't we? We remembered how a pumpkin grows. Everyone helped to remember. And we will be doing that today in small group too. So if you have small group today, we will also be talking about how a pumpkin grows. All right, so let's see, what is our book today? It also has to do with pumpkins, but this one is more of a story book. It's a story, it's not a true story, it's a pretend story. So let's see, I see some mice, and it looks like they're sitting on top of a pumpkin, and down below there are even more mice. So, this book is called The Biggest Pumpkin Ever. And let's see how we end up with the biggest pumpkin ever. Of course, you have to remember, these are mice, right? Looks like the characters in the book it shows on the front are mice. So what they think is a big pumpkin is going to be different than what we people think is a big pumpkin, right? So here we go. The biggest pumpkin ever. Once there were two mice who fell in love with the same pumpkin. Clayton, the house mouse, noticed it one day in the vegetable garden. It was still little and green, but Clayton thought he could make it grow really big. It might even get big enough to win the grand prize at the town pumpkin contest. And you can see there Clayton has a little kind of cloud bubble above his head, and that shows that he's daydreaming about winning the grand prize. Desmond, the field mouse, discovered the pumpkin the same day. He thought that if he helped it grow, it could become the biggest jack-o'-lantern in the neighborhood. And you can see Clayton has one of those cloud bubbles above his head too, and he is daydreaming about having the biggest jack-o'-lantern in the neighborhood. But remember, they're both looking at the same pumpkin. That afternoon, Clayton watered the pumpkin. He also mixed up some fertilizer of manure and water. He spread the mixture around the pumpkin to make it grow larger. That very same night, Desmond went into the garden. He watered the pumpkin too. He also spread some manure mixed with water around it. The next day, Clayton watered and fertilized the pumpkin again. The next night, Desmond did the same, and the pumpkin began to grow. By the end of a month, the pumpkin was so large, Clayton couldn't believe his eyes. "My goodness," said Clayton's mother, "and it's not even full grown." Clayton shrugged. "All I do is water it," he said. Clayton's mother whispered in his ear, "If you want the pumpkin to grow bigger, faster," she said, "you should use sugar water." That night, Desmond brought his brother Morris to see the pumpkin. Morris knew everything there was to know about growing things. "That's some pumpkin," he said. Desmond shrugged. "All I do is water it," he said. Morris whispered in his ear, "You should try using sugar water," he said. So both of the mice got the same suggestion of how to make the pumpkin grow big. The next day, Clayton dug a small hole beside the pumpkin vine. In the hole, he placed a bowl full of sugar water. He cut into the vine a few inches from the pumpkin. In the cut, he put one end of a piece of candle wick. Then he put the other end in the bowl of sugar water. That night, on the other side of the pumpkin, Desmond did exactly the same thing. So look at that, they are both feeding the pumpkin sugar water from both different sides. Within a week, the pumpkin was twice the size it had been. Within 2 weeks, it was absolutely enormous. was amazed. He ran down the road and peeked into his friend Jimmy's pumpkin patch. The pumpkin Jimmy was growing for the contest looked much smaller. Clayton scratched his head. "I have an amazing pumpkin," he said out loud, "and I think I'm going to win the contest." That night, Desmond and his brother Morris spent a long time looking at the pumpkin. "How do you think it got that big?" Desmond asked. Morris shrugged. "A little luck, a little skill. It's going to make some jack-o'-lantern," said Desmond. "It sure is," said Morris. A week later, Clayton noticed the pumpkin was bigger than the family car. During the day, everyone he knew came by to admire it. And at night, all the field mice gathered round to do the same. By now, summer was almost over. In a week, the pumpkin would be full grown and start turning yellowish and then orange. A few weeks after that, it would be ripe and ready for the pumpkin contest. Clayton could hardly wait. The pumpkin was growing so fast it would soon be larger than his house. Then he had a terrible thought. If the pumpkin was so big, how would he get it to the contest? It wouldn't fit in his red wagon. It wouldn't even fit in his truck. Clayton decided to worry about this when the time came. That is a big problem, isn't it? If a pumpkin is so big, you can't even fit it in a truck to get it there. That night, the weather grew colder. Thinking there might be an early frost, Clayton rushed out to the pumpkin with his blanket. One was not enough. Soon he was rushing back and forth, carrying all the blankets from the house. As he worked, he hummed a little song, and as he hummed, he heard someone else singing. He also began to realize that someone else was covering the pumpkin with blankets. Desmond, too, had seen the danger of an early frost. He, too, had brought blankets for the pumpkin. And as he worked, he sang a little song. And as he sang, he began to realize that someone else was working and humming. They're starting to discover each other, huh? Clayton stopped humming. He put down his pile of blankets and peered around the corner of the pumpkin. Desmond stopped singing. He put down his blankets and peered around the corner of the pumpkin. The two of them bumped heads and fell down. "You've been feeding the pumpkin," said Clayton. "You've been feeding the pumpkin," said Desmond. "That's why it got so big," said Clayton. "That's why it got so big," said Desmond. They burst out laughing. All that time they had both been on other sides of the pumpkin, taking care of it together. When everything had been explained, Clayton said, "I know I'll win the contest if I can get the pumpkin to town." Desmond smiled. I'll help you. Just let me carve the pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern for Halloween when the contest is over." "It's a deal," said Clayton. "A deal," said Desmond, and they shook on it. The morning of the contest was bright and sunny. Mice were bringing their pumpkins to the town square by truck and car and wagon. Some were rolling them along the ground. Suddenly they all stopped short. Over the fields came the biggest pumpkin anyone had ever seen. It was being pulled by 100 field mice on motorcycles. Whoa. When the pumpkin reached town, it was too big for any of the streets. Clayton had to explain why they couldn't bring it to the square. The mayor understood at once. He led the crowd to the giant pumpkin and pinned the first prize ribbon on its side. There it is. Then everyone danced around it. Who Who would have believed this, said Clayton as he danced. Who would have believed this, said Desmond at the same time. When the celebration was over, the 100 field mice pulled the pumpkin back to the field. The day before Halloween, they carved it into the best jack-o'-lantern ever. Look at that, they're having to stand up on ladders and stuff and climb up to the top to do it. And on Halloween night, its wonderful, smiling face could be seen glowing for miles around. Right, so that's the story of the biggest pumpkin ever. And now I'm going to show you our new work for today. All right, so this did not have anything in your take-home packet, except for in the email I sent there were directions, okay? So we are going to make a fingerprint pumpkin patch. Now this is a super easy, super fun, simple activity, all right? So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna get a piece of paper. I usually use manila paper, but if you don't have that, you can use white paper, that's fine too, okay? And then you're going to need a green crayon or green marker or some kind of green drawing utensil. So the first thing you're gonna do is remember to write your name or trace your name. And then you're going to take your green crayon or marker or colored pencil or whatever it is, and you're gonna scribble all over your paper. I know that sounds wild. Miss Mika's telling us to scribble? Yes, I am. I am telling you to scribble all over your paper. And then it's gonna look like this. And guess what that is? Those are your pumpkin vines, right? Remember we learned the other day when we read Pumpkin Pumpkin that pumpkins grow on vines? So these are your pumpkin vines. Then you're going to use some orange paint. Maybe you have some left over from the other day when you mixed it up. Remember you mixed red and yellow to make orange, so I did that here. And I'm gonna just pour some into a little container. Okay, I don't need much, just so it's easier to get my finger in there. Okay, it's a little harder to get my finger into this container without getting paint all over my whole hand. I don't care if you get paint all over your whole hand, but Miss Mika doesn't really like to get paint on her hand. All right, so then you're gonna pick a finger on your hand and you're gonna dip it into the paint. All right, just kind of like that. And then you're gonna use that finger, I'm using my thumb, to stamp on your paper. Each of these little orange stamps is a pumpkin in your pumpkin patch, and it's growing on the vines that you made with scribbling. So you can see I have lots of different sizes of pumpkins here. I'll show you. And then you'll need to wash your hand off. Now I just have a little piece of paper towel that I'm wiping my finger on here. But you'll want to go wash your hands. And I'll wash my hands when I'm all done with circle time here too. So there are my pumpkins in my pumpkin patch growing on the vines. See, it's a super simple, easy activity to do, and it turns out looking really cute. All right, so that's one of our things. Another one we have is, of course, pumpkin pin poking. All right, and you remember how to do this. You're gonna get out your pin poking kit, your carpet, and your pin poker that's in the cork to keep it safe. And we're gonna remember the rules when we do this work, that we don't bring our pin poker other places around our house, or if you're at school, around the school. We keep it with our work, right? We also don't poke ourselves with this, and we don't poke other people with this. Those are very important rules. So we're gonna take one of our pumpkins and put it on top of our carpet. And take our pin poker out of the cork, and then we're going to carefully poke holes right next to each other, remember? You can't make the magic happen unless you put the holes right next to each other. So I'm going kind of quick because I want to finish it so I can show you the magic. All right, but you will probably not be going as quickly as me. And remember, you're putting those little pokes right on the line of the pumpkin. If you put them other places, then your pumpkin will not, you won't be able to do the magic, all right? The magic only happens if you have the holes punched on the pumpkin line. So I'm just gonna keep going here. Remember, you have to keep moving your paper around on top of your carpet because it's smaller than your paper, all right? And you can use your helper hand to do that. And you can also see how I'm using my helper hand to hold down my pin poking paper. And that's so it doesn't slide around on me while I'm trying to poke the holes. I'm almost done here. All right, and then when I'm done, remember I'm gonna put my pin poker right back in the cork to keep it safe. Having trouble getting it down the hole. All right, and then I'm gonna show you, there's the back of the pumpkin, you can see all the holes. And then I'm gonna ask a grown-up to do the magic for me, all right? At least at first, until you get good at it, because it's kind of hard to take out without tearing. All right, so you're gonna have your grown-up punch it out. Yep, see, and I even tore a little spot there. All right, and there is my pumpkin. And remember, it's kind of cool to hang these up in a window. And then, since I'm all done doing my pin poking, as usual, I'm gonna put all of my pin poking supplies away and have my mom and dad put them up where they cannot be touched by other people. All right, so that is our pumpkin pin poking. And I have one more thing to show you. So in your packet, you have a little packet of picture cards. Now this is similar to the Apple Story cards. Goodness gracious, what is on here? This is similar to the Apple Story cards that you got last week. All right, except for these tell the story of how a pumpkin grows. All right, so I'm going to kind of spread them out up here. And for this, you'll also need another piece of paper, and I usually like to use a long piece of paper. But if you don't have a long piece of paper, you can cut a short piece of paper in half and either glue it together or tape it together. So I'm remembering from the book Pumpkin Pumpkin that the first thing I do to grow a pumpkin is to plant a seed. So there's the seed, and the paper says plant the pumpkin seed. All right, so I'm going to use my glue stick, and I'm going to put some glue on there, and I'm going to stick this down, and it says plant the pumpkin seed. And I think for this one you might actually have to make 2 rows. All right, after the pumpkin seed is planted, I remember from the book that we got a little sprout, and this says a tiny plant grows. So there's our sprout, our little pumpkin sprout. So I'm going to stick that down there. And then, let's see, after the pumpkin sprout, I remember that a vine, let's see here, wait a minute, let me make sure. Yep, this is the next one. A vine grows with leaves on it. So I'm going to glue that one down next. And then after the vine grows with leaves on it, remember we get a flower. So this one says flowers grow on the vine. So I'm going to stick that one down next. And after the flowers grow on the vine, then I remember that a little green pumpkin starts to grow. So there's the little green pumpkin starting to grow. All right, and then the pumpkin grows bigger. Now I'm gonna have to start another row down here. And the pumpkin grows bigger and it turns orange, and now it's ready to pick. And then there's an extra card here that was not in the book. In the book, remember, the little boy Jamie carved the pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern. Well, in this case, they picked the pumpkin and they decided to make a pumpkin pie. And I just had pumpkin pie the other night for my brother's birthday. And guess who made the pumpkin pie? I made the pumpkin pie, and guess where the pumpkins came from? Yeah, the pumpkins actually came from my garden last year that I grew. Not this year, but last year I still had frozen pumpkin. All right, so there I have the story of how a pumpkin grows. All right, and I forgot a pencil, but I need to remember to write my name, so I just grabbed that crayon there. Miss Mika. All right, and then that is what I have for you today. So some of you I will see at 10:30 today for our small group time, and we'll be learning a pumpkin finger play, and we will be talking about how a pumpkin grows.